Hi. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. It's 11:45,
Yeah.
and I'm Mandy Shoemaker, and I've my friend here, Jim Gum, and we're really excited to bring you a conversation today about the Let Them theory, the new book released by Mel Robbins in December, and the Enneagram, and what it's like to let them uh, from different types of Enneagram. And then the other component of the let them theory, let me from my own type of Enneagram. So I'm going to let Jim just say a couple words about him, and then we'll jump into the let
Yeah.
them theory.
So I'm Jim Gum, and I'm with Story Enneagram and do training and coaching, and love the Enneagram, love the idea of how this information applies to each type. And I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. When Mandy approached me with this, I was very excited because I had sent the short clip of Let Them to many clients this past year, and I found it to be a very helpful thing for most people. But it's a little bit more nuanced than just let them. But it sure is powerful, though.
Definitely. So, what is the let them theory? If you're new to it, haven't read Mel Robbins' book, Mel Robbins is an author. She's been around for 10 plus years. She has a very popular global podcast that comes out at least weekly. And about a year and a half ago, she released a podcast sharing her let them theory. It went viral. Millions of people worldwide kind of went crazy over it. And so she ended up writing a book, The Let Them Theory, which really has surprised me in how comprehensive it is in looking at applying the let them theory to so many different parts of life. So just super duper quick on let them theory. The whole idea is that that we don't give control or emotional energy to other people, that the only thing we have control over is ourselves. And so if somebody's doing something that is triggering us, annoying us, making us feel guilty, all those kinds of things, that we can just simply make a choice to let them. And that gives us some space between our maybe more triggered, activated reaction. And it gives us time to really connect with our authentic selves and think about, how can I let me respond authentically in a way that's aligned with my values, in a way that's aligned with my authentic self. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Jim, do you want to cue us up for the Enneagram types that we're going to talk about today?
Yeah. So we're only going to do 3 types in each of these, and we're going to do them by center. And if you've never heard of the Enneagram, very basically, it is about 9, which is what the Ennea prefix means. 9 different patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting. And these are largely kind of our factory settings. They're built in, they're unconscious, but it does show up, especially when we get triggered or when we get bugged in interactions with other people. So they're somewhat predictable. So what I'm going to do is, for each type, I'm going to talk about if someone is an 8, or if someone is a different type, a particular type, what's it going to look like to let them? And then if you are that type, what's it going to look like for you to let me? Okay, that's what we're going to do. So Enneagram wise, the 8, we're going to start with the 8, and the 8, 9, and 1 is in the body center, and it's about command and control. And the 8 is an acting type in the acting center, and they are strong and passionate and direct. And if you have an archetype, that it's typically the masculine archetype. And so that's what it means to be an 8. You're strong, passionate, and direct. So that's a description of what an 8 is.
All right, great. So then why don't we think about, what does it feel like to let them for an 8 or someone who is an 8?
Yeah. So if you are with an 8 and you've got a conflict here and you go, I'm going to let them be an 8. You need to know that they will have something to say. They won't go quietly. And it reminds me of this quote by Henry Cloud that I heard years ago. He goes, just because someone's screaming doesn't mean they're in pain. And so you kind of should expect a reaction. You should expect a counter or a protest, but that's part of it. That's part of what it means to let them.
So do you think that 8s tend to have a pretty quick, triggered, passionate response?
It depends on the subtype a little bit, but in general, they have the strongest instinctual energy. And as one of my teachers says, they're trying to decide between yes and yes. They just got to do it, and right now.
Right.
So brings me to the second point. Though they react strongly, they also will burn quick and it will blow over. Also, it probably won't fester and they won't think about it later. You will.
Right. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. And that's their learning that they need to do in their time, is how they affect other people. But they sleep fine at night, which is why I hate them. Not really. I really love 8s. But
right. If I have a run-in with an 8 and we have something go on, then I'm awake all night thinking about it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, no idea that it sent me in a tailspin.
No. And they tend to not harbor that.
Yeah.
You got to meet their energy, but they're always going to have an opinion. And then last one, and I think this one's really key, is, since I said this group's in the, command and control, and that's really what 8s are about. So when you're in a situation where they have no agency, that's going to be really difficult for them. You have to realize that going in. That's a let them, like, oh, if they don't feel any agency, if there's a way to give them some agency, it's going to go a little bit better.
So then, flipping the stage, the other half of the let them theory is let me. Yeah. And so if I am, for all those 8s out there who it's going to be really, really hard for them to have that let them pause to actually think about it before they react. What do 8s need to know about me? Yeah.
So let me be passionate. There's a certain sense that 8s only have one way to go through life, and that's all in. They're all in. They're passionate. And so the let me would be, okay, I'm probably going to be the most passionate person, whatever the situation is. Let me be the most passionate person. Let me not expect others to have as much passion as I have.
And that's okay.
And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Odds of them meeting your energy are pretty low. Second thing is, and this is hard, is let me pause. Let me pause. And a lot of other types of people need time. They're not as instinctual. They need to think about it. And pausing is not the worst thing. There's sometimes when there's an emergency, but it's about 1/9 of the time.
Right.
It's not very often. So, let me pause. It won't kill me to pause for a minute.
Yeah. So even that stepping back a little bit. Yeah.
It's going to be just absolutely fine to step back for a minute.
Reel it in. Mm-hmm. And I still might be able to have control, even if I reel it in.
Yeah. And if I was to say the essence of what Enneagram growth is, very simply, it is me observing what's going on with my type and pausing instead of reacting. And so for the 8 of all the types, that pause is so critical, because they're used to making their way in the world by kind of blunt force. And everybody knows when the 8's there, and they're great leaders. They're often the leaders. They're strong. So that's a real critical thing to know. And then the last one on the let me would be, and I think this is really important, that understanding what the let them theory is not.
Mm.
It's not like, oh, let them.
Right.
They're stupid.
Right.
To not
Like,
do that.
yeah, like we'll just write them off and move on.
Yeah. I was with a gentleman this past week who we were talking about this let them idea. He was a hockey goalie, and he told this story. What let them meant to him was that if he ever got pulled from the game, he said, well, let him lose the game, even though it's his own team.
Right.
And that was his mindset. And that is not what let them means.
So let's talk through what the healthy version of that would be.
Yeah. So let them allows the other person to have their idea, to have their point, to have their way of doing things. And I don't need to dismiss them outright. I think that's what happens with the 8 is the dismissal of the person. Write him off. Well, you're dead to me. And that doesn't work long term in any co-working situation, any relationship.
So if I'm this goalie, I, rather than saying, oh, let him lose, they're going to pull me out, let him lose, that I can say, okay, let them try somebody else and see how they do.
Yeah. It's okay.
And let me,
might not mean I did anything wrong.
Right. Let me be okay with somebody else doing well.
Yeah.
Let me be okay not playing, not, I think, then I think, as we're talking about that, I'm then seeing all these little firings of what would come up for somebody who's really trying to pause. I mean, that's as myself having been mistyped as an 8 for a long time, I do have a lot of 8 tendencies.
Yeah.
So I totally understand that.
Yeah. And like it's going to be a huge growth thing to stay engaged instead of just writing somebody off and dismissing them. And and that can happen with the 8 a little bit too quickly. So they look like they're the best at the let them theory.
Right.
They are in the one half of it, but not the let me.
Right. Exactly.
Let me stay engaged.
Okay. So anything else on 8s?
I think in general, the thing that's really important to know about 8s is they have a very good, kind heart with a very strong exterior. And in a sense, when you're letting them, if you could go beyond that coding or the bluster or that strength, there's a person there who's very passionate, very caring, and very innocent, childlike.
Yeah. So keeping in mind what's inside for each type.
Yeah.
That the how we show up in our Enneagram type is really just so many different ways of protecting.
Yeah.
Ways we've learned of protecting ourselves from our core fears.
Yeah.
So 9 is our next type.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about 9s.
So I love this rubric that Claudio Naranjo gave for the centers, that in the body center, which is acting, command and control, the 8 does it by acting. The 9 does it by feeling. They're the sensor. And so the words that I would use to describe a 9 they'd be peaceful, harmonious, supportive. And it's the archetype of how we all fall asleep in our patterns and our habits. We tend to be very predictable in our responses. And so the 9 is, I've fallen asleep to who I am, to what I want. And at its worst, they go along just to get along, and they don't show up fully.
And at their best?
At their best, they know exactly what they want. They are actually, they go for the things they know they want, that they know deep down, and they are strong. They're actually very strong and forceful. So it's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So what does let them look like for a
Okay.
9?
So if you're interacting with a 9, and what does let them look like? In general, a lot of times what you're going to experience is some resistance that feels like stubbornness.
Mm.
That's probably what you're going to experience. And you might experience them verbally telling you everything that you think that you want to hear, but not actually doing anything to follow up on that.
So they're going to tell you what you want to hear, but not have the action behind it.
But it's going to be, in a sense, how do I get my way, but still be nice and not be in conflict?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that the 8, when they want to get their way, they just get their way.
Mm-hmm.
The 9 can't do that, but they feel it as almost as strongly as the 8.
So if I'm interacting with a 9, what do I need to keep in mind to let them?
Yeah. So what you hear in that first interaction might not be long-term what they're really wanting to say or what the situation really is.
Okay. So let them have some time.
Yeah. Let them have some time.
Yeah.
Secondly, I just think the let them is indecisiveness has its own consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And, that, I mean, and you don't want to say it like, well, I told you, but know that might be part of their experience, that if they missed out on something because they didn't show up, that's part of what happens sometimes in that indecision.
Yeah. And I think that's even a crucial part, a key part of the let them theory in general, is just that whole thread of let them make their own mistakes. Let
Yeah.
them suffer the consequences of their own behavior. That those things are okay. That often our initial reaction is to rescue, to fix, to save, to do all of those things, but people won't change for the better unless they feel some pain as the result of their behavior.
Yeah. Change is very hard for most everybody. And I think it's until the pain of not changing is worse than the pain that they believe it's going to take to change.
Yes.
They probably won't do it. That's pretty much it. That's me too.
In the let them theory, Mel Robbins says people change when they feel like it.
Yeah.
Because because people can want to change for a long time, but until they feel like doing the uncomfortable, hard thing that change requires, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. You got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Right. Right.
So,
speaking of you powering through your cold.
Yes.
Thanks for being here.
Yes. The third thing is in the let them, they might not say what they're really feeling. So that's just a hard thing, that it's hard if you're used to taking everything at face value. What you're realizing is you might not be getting face value. And that's their work to do, to begin to line their inside and outside up. And I can't do it for them because sometimes they don't know it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a lot of these behaviors or potentially negative behavior patterns. Oh, thank you, Laura. This is my first time doing LinkedIn Live, and I just clicked on a comment and it showed up there on the screen.
Cool.
Oh, now I can make it go away. Great. My friend Laura, who is a social worker, knows a lot about these things. So then how do we start letting, so how do we let me if we're a 9?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is usually about pace. Is let me accept my own pace. I tend to
Mm.
maybe go a little slower than other people, and sometimes what's great about that is I make better decisions because I've taken in a lot more information and I've considered a lot of stuff. So be okay with that. Let me be my own pace. Second one is let me know what I want. This is
Not
really
what
huge.
needs to happen to keep everybody else happy, because
That's
the
right.
nine's goal is to keep the peace.
Keep the peace, the
Yeah.
peacemaker, and harmony is really important. And so what happens, and this is where they fall asleep, is they fall asleep to what they want. They fall asleep to what's important to them. And it's almost as if sometimes when they consult others, they'll hear one person's point of view and they will be completely convinced about that. And then they'll hear another point of view that's opposite, and they'll be completely convinced of that as well. And so there's kind of this double-mindedness. And in that process, they lose touch with themselves.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
they're so susceptible to just going along
yeah,
with what the other person is saying. They don't think necessarily about their own preferences or needs or
yeah.
beliefs.
And you mentioned earlier in terms of power or giving your power away. That's what's happening with the nines. They're giving their power all day. A nine, when they're alone by themselves before another person is around, they have some really clear ideas of what they want.
Mm.
They think what they do. As soon as another human being enters into that situation, their focus goes there. And then another person comes in, and then it's like they are in a slow leak all day long of their energy and their power. So part of that growth thing is pulling that in and getting back in touch. And part of it is, love one another as love others as you love yourself. Is that love yourself thing? They're really
Mhm.
good at loving others. The work is I need to love myself. Let me love myself.
Yeah.
I think
Does that apply maybe to every type?
yeah, self-compassion.
In
But
just in different ways, in whatever our different, self-talk is. I think it's different for each type,
yeah,
but
I think it's to value the other, to value myself as much as I
yeah.
value the other.
Yeah, I like that.
That love isn't love if it's only one way. It has to be reciprocal, you
Mhm.
know, giving and taking. So yeah.
Alright.
Um so where
I know, I'm trying to see where we are
I think we finished the let me of
with
oh no, I didn't finish it. I've
okay,
got one more.
okay.
Um let me let others be unhappy.
Mhm.
And Mel has a whole thing in her
There's a
book.
whole chapter on that.
There's a whole chapter on that. And anything you want to add from the book that Mel shared about that would be insightful?
Well, there's a story that I think you and I have talked about,
Yeah.
that she shares, and I actually went back and revisited it the other day because I was trying to utilize it for a different thing that I was doing. And it's not a story from her life, which there are a lot of in the book, but it's just really an example.
Yeah.
And it to me was the most clear example that I have ever come in contact with that showed living through your values. So
Mm.
how do I show up in a difficult situation and be happy with myself that I truly lived through my own values and showed up at my authentic self. And a summary of the story is that this person has a busy weekend coming up. They have an old friend who has a milestone birthday, and they're doing it's a woman, and so it's a girls' weekend or whatever. And then this person's grandparents are also coming in town, and their mom has been, has said, we really, really want you to be there to see them. And so heading into it, this person is like, oh gosh, I can't spend the whole, I want to do both. It's important to me to do both. My values are maintaining friendships, connections, relationships, and family. So how can I do both? So this person drives on Friday, has a great time with, or Saturday or whatever, but goes one day, has a great time with a friend, stays up late, was totally awesome. So glad she went, but gets up early and has like a long drive, like a 4-hour drive back to her parents. And so as she's on the drive, she's thinking, oh, I'm so glad I went. That was such a great night. It was so good to connect with everybody. But she gets a text from her friend saying, so glad you could be here. I only wish you could have stayed for the whole weekend. And then as she pulls up at her parents, her grandparents are there and everybody comes out and is giving her a hug. And her mom whispers in her ear saying, it's great to see you, but it sure would have been nice if you could have been here when they arrived. And just this, that I think we can get so caught up in then having to explain ourselves and feeling bad because we couldn't do it all.
Yeah.
Or we can feel good because we did do it all and we live through our values. And so I think, as a 9, looking at, there is no way to make everybody happy and to keep, so looking even at keeping my inner peace.
Yeah.
And anyway, and so, Mel says there's chapters on people are going to have bad thoughts about you. Let them. And she's like, how many times do you have a bad thought about your dog? But you still love them, like it's okay.
Yeah.
So, and just that, don't give people control.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that, that one comment can kind of send us or put us on a tailspin. And it's hard to stay centered and grounded and living out of our values. Everybody has a challenge with that.
Yes.
Sure.
My last 24 hours, I've been doing a lot of work on that personally. So, and I'm just so glad to have the tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And anyway, so,
never ends. Never ends.
It never ends. I mean, there isn't an end. So I've just come to that conclusion and it's good.
Right.
I like to learn. So, and grow.
I love what Richard Rohr says is he says, I pray for one good humiliation every day. And then we, keep us humble. Keep us humble.
Right. That's a good one. I like
Oh
that.
my gosh.
All right. So what about ones?
Yeah.
So
let's go to the last type 1. And type 1 in the acting center, command and control, they're the thinker. And they do it by being principled, by being reliable, by being objective. And it's the archetype of the parent, the adult, the superego. And as much as the 8 is always starting with yes, the 1 is kind of always starting with no. And, there's these postures that I've learned through Chestnut Pice Enneagram called mudras. And for the 1, the picture is they stand against reality. It needs to be this way. And so part of that, there's some wonderful things about that, but it can be really hard on the let them side for the 1. Really hard.
And let them, ones is the perfectionist. Yeah.
Yes.
So very, very strong, right or wrong. The way I do it is the right way.
Yep.
So how do we let ones let them?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've realized is they are going to have a really hard time owning a mistake.
Okay.
And to just let go of expecting that to happen very easily.
Let them not own it.
Well, yeah, and part of it is, we all have a way that we build our ego. All 9 types are basically a way to build up our ego. And the ones built up their ego and being right, or trying to not make mistakes. And so a mistake is an identity crisis of the biggest thing. So if you're gonna try to convince them that they need to own and make that mistake, and you might get very tired.
Yes.
So, and the other thing in terms of letting them is they don't need a lot of correction. So they're the ones that put pressure on themselves to be the very best they can be. And it's a huge burden that they have, I think, sometimes. And so we want to make sure, if ever there's areas where we're really in conflict, we don't want to dogpile on that.
Yeah. Or if maybe you're a leader of a 1 and they have made a mistake, we can trust, we can let them have our trust that they're going to fix it.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain sense of needing, everybody makes mistakes. That's part of being human.
Right.
So that's that aspect of letting them, they're going to do their own work in terms of what they need to do to correct things. And I probably don't have as much work myself to do for them. Well, it's not going to be helpful.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about the no before.
Yeah. So, the idea that the 1 is the most anti-instinctual and the 8 is the most instinctual. So the 1 is a lot of times going to start with no, especially if it's new, especially if it's never been done before, especially if it seems frivolous, childish, fun.
And I'm a 7. So anybody who knows anything about a 7, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. I'm sure I drive 1s crazy.
Yeah. So typically, that's going to be a knee-jerk reaction, is probably, giving themselves permission to do something, considering another idea, especially something that seems irresponsible. That's
so
going to
if
be.
they start with a no,
Yeah.
but we really need a yes.
Yeah. So they're probably going to need time. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're probably going to need time. That initial reaction is just a reaction. So probably just to not end there. That doesn't mean it's over, the conversation.
I think that's a good reminder for everybody that, anybody's initial response or reaction to something doesn't mean the conversation is over.
Yeah. And that's typically when we see someone's type the most, is in that reactive state.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing the best of that type. We're usually seeing kind of the automatic and unconscious response of that type.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the let me, this, let me not need to be right. So 1s typically have really strong opinions about right, wrong, good, bad, proper, improper. I mean, super strong opinions. And others are going to differ than that. And others might do like things like shades of gray. Like it depends. You know, they're not going to be black and white thinkers. So let me not need to win this argument. You know, let me not need to be right.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard sometimes, because I think one, you know, in their most reactive state, that is the most important thing, is to always be right or perfect.
That just gives me just the pressure to be a one. Like it makes me, have some compassion.
Yeah, it would be hard to have that burden, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't carry that. The second thing I have is just as a one, let me be open to changing my mind. And I think what's really interesting, and this is talking to ones, I remember having some ones on a panel years ago, and someone who was not a one asked them a very poignant question, like, how do you know what's right? And they looked at one another like that's a crazy question, because we just know what's right. So there's a certain sense of what right is to the one is really much they kind of feel like it's from within, and it's strong opinion on whatever it is. The crazy thing is, it might not be
right. Yes, I mean,
yeah. And
so what do you do? Like,
well, I had one friend and they were a married couple, and one person in the couple who had a lot of one-ish tendencies would always argue about words, or argue about meaning. And his wife one time said, "Hey, you're not in charge of the English language. You're not the boss of the English language." And so there's a certain sense that's really hard for a one to carry the burden of actually having to know everything when they feel like they know everything. I mean, that sense of, I just feel this is right. I feel this is what we should do. I feel it is so strong within them that to let that go, to let me be open, that's the only way you can, relax that intensity standing against reality. Anything you want to add on that?
I just so for our viewers, Jim is certified in how many different Enneagram?
Oh,
3,
narrative 4. And Chestnut Pice, Enneagram Academy, IQ 9. Yeah.
Yeah. So many Enneagram schools of thought and certifications. I'm just in the process of completing my first. So that's why Jim is really taking the lead, because he's the expert here. And but one of the things in my class for IEQ 9, there was a woman who was a 1, and I am very much not a perfectionist. Although there are certain things that I want to be a certain way, I'm, in general, not a perfectionist. And she talked about how hard it is to be somewhere where something that is like, it's almost that OCD kind of, that I can imagine that it must feel like this unbearable urge to fix things all the time with whatever's in their, realm of what they really have to, what they really feel is right. So I think that would just be something strong to have to overcome.
It's so second nature that it's just, it's kind of like you can't let it go.
Right.
I had a friend who's a 1 who did some proofreading for me, best proofreader I ever had by far. I had proofread everything, had another person proofread it, and then she still found all these things. I said, how do you do that? And she said, well, I can't not see it. I can't not see it. And
Right.
I think there's that sense of, you've got this really strong sense of right, wrong, or how things should be. And, you know, all the Enneagram types are a lens that you look at the world through, and they just, you know, that standard of perfection. So the last thing I have for them is you're going to have to let yourself have higher standards and
Than
not
other people.
than other people. Just like the
Yeah.
eight's you're gonna be more passionate than everybody about everything you do. They're going to have higher standards, and
Yeah.
you don't have to, you know, dismiss them if they don't, or write them off. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do things. And that also means for them, if something's really important, you can hold on to that. That's let me. No, I don't want to cut a corner here.
Yeah.
This is important to me.
And from my
I don't want to
perspective,
lose
that's
that.
let them, those things that they, you know, that they feel so strongly about, that it's okay if they do it 10 times better than it really needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And, you know, that idea of that, you know, it's probably not going to go away. But it's really good that they have high standards. That's a good thing. They don't have to break them. Now, part of it, you know, their growth thing is to begin to relax that sense of perfection, seeing things as perfect, seeing imperfect things as somewhat perfect. It's a really hard thing, but they can grow in that way and kind of, you know, relax. It's like letting go of the weight of the world of I have to correct the whole world.
Right.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally visualize it as a release, you know, like
Yeah.
that you're letting the pressure out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I think those things come up for any type.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're just about to our end. We
Yeah.
have covered how do we let them for types 8, 9, and 1.
Yeah.
Our next part of the series will be February 7th,
Yeah.
right? February 7th. And so we will do the heart types, which are 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
And this recording will be posted. This is our first time. I hope we did okay. We've gotten a couple comments, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And we could, if there's anybody who has a question or anything, when you can type in your comments and I can see them come through, we're happy to answer. And then we kind of hit our time. So Jim and I will hang out for a couple more minutes if you have questions, but thanks for being here, and we hope you'll join us next time.
Yeah. Well, Mandy, what are you doing for your work these days? How would you describe your work other than when you're here on LinkedIn Live?
My
What are you
work?
hoping to do? Yeah.
I am in the process of launching coaching, getting my ACC, so just that initial level of coaching certification, which I know you recently kind of finished yours. And then, so I am working with people through Enneagram and coaching and doing Enneagram for teams as well.
Yeah.
So, and am leading a book club that has it's not for work, it's really for fun, but has about 80 people in it. And we just so happen to be doing the Let Them theory for our first book.
Which is great, which is really going to be fun.
So yes, it is.
So same thing for me. I do coaching with people, executive coaching, life coaching, couples. Use the Enneagram as kind of a framework, but it's basic coaching, and then also do team building. How do we communicate? How do we all understand each other, and use that through the lens of the Enneagram? So anyway, we look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thanks for being here, everybody.
We'll see you later.
Okay.